I want to start with two stories from the New York Times that, taken together, capture the paradox of the current moment. The first is about the brutal labor market for computer science graduates. Meet Zach Taylor, a recent Oregon State University comp sci grad who did everything right. For a decade, the tech industry told everyone to learn to code. Zach answered that call. But now that he has his degree, AI is starting to absorb the opportunities available to him. His story in particular is shocking because of its scale. Since 2023, Zach sent out over 5,000 job applications. He got called back for just 13 interviews, and he has received 0 offers. He did everything right, but the economy he graduated into has changed. As one economist in the Times story put it, the positions most likely to be automated are the entry-level positions that they would be seeking. He's reaching out for the first rung of the career ladder, and AI has sawed it away. It turns out coding is the perfect target for automation. It's highly structured with clear right and wrong answers, and there's tons of training data. But this isn't the only kind of knowledge work AI is coming for, which brings me to the second story. The headline reads, "This AI company wants to take your job." Now, we're used to seeing these kinds of overhyped promises, but usually Silicon Valley wraps them in euphemisms. They talk about empowering workers or being a co-pilot. They put a spin on it. But this startup is saying the quiet part out loud. When interviewed, they don't equivocate. They come right out and say, "Our goal is to fully automate all work as fast as possible." And when asked about the ethical implications, they offered a cold, utilitarian calculation that the rewards of a wealthier society outweigh the downside of people losing their jobs. This is the automation story we're being told. The science fiction scenario is becoming reality. We're being left behind by technology, and it feels like there's nothing we can do. And data shows we've internalized that message. When asked about AI's effect on their job prospects, a Pew Research study found that only 6% of workers think AI will help them. 32% expect fewer opportunities. Most people aren't optimistic. This widespread pessimism is the foundation of the myth of automation's inevitability. But is it inevitable? I want to introduce two thinkers who refuse to accept that premise. They push back on the inevitability myth, but in very different ways. On one side, we have Brian Merchant. He's a tech journalist. His book, Blood in the Machine, looks back to the Luddites, the original 19th century workers who smashed textile machinery that threatened to replace them. Merchant argues they weren't anti-technology, they were anti-exploitation. He challenges the narrative that workers are powerless against technological change. On the other side, we have Aaron Bastani. He's a British political commentator with a futurist take. His book, Fully Automated Luxury Communism, asks a radical question. What if automation didn't serve profit? What if it was used to serve the social good? He asks us to imagine a post-scarcity world. So Merchant argues that the relentless and authoritative sounding presentation of mass automation as our technological destiny is one reason that so many people remain afraid. It's this fear that employers can and do use as leverage against workers. For Merchant, automation serves as a disciplinary myth that keeps workers compliant. If you ask for a raise or try to organize, they simply tell you you're replaceable. Merchant gives us a program of resistance, a tactical challenge to this mythology. He's saying we can learn from the Luddite uprising, but he doesn't spend as much time arguing where we should go from there. Bastani takes another approach. He argues the deeper problem is that we've lost the capacity to imagine alternatives. We've become so conditioned by the current system that the trajectory we're on feels like the only possible one, what he calls capitalist realism. He asks us to reconsider this whole arrangement, presenting us with a completely different kind of project. What if the problem isn't the technology, but the values behind it? Who controls it? For what purpose? What if instead automation could mean post-scarcity, abundance, and leisure? This is the vision, but Bastani doesn't provide a clear pathway. How do we actually get there? So we've got two incomplete visions. Merchant gives us a program, tactics for resistance, ways to see through the myth and fight back, but he's not really telling us where we're supposed to end up. Bastani gives us a project, a vision of what automation could become, but no clear path to get there. A program without a project without a program. Here, I'm looking for a bridge that can put these ideas together with a productive synthesis. I argue we must seriously consider universal basic income, a guaranteed income floor for everyone. A basic income won't solve every issue around labor and automation, but it fundamentally changes the equation under which we operate. People are so busy surviving that they don't have time to ask what else is possible. UBI buys time, and time is what you need to imagine alternatives. So one major objection to the idea of UBI is that it would simply consolidate power to the current titans of industry. And that is a real concern. In Merchant's book, he makes this exact argument, that UBI serves the elite power of big tech because it requires the riches to flow through them to trickle down to the rest of us. But Merchant's whole analysis is about how we don't have to accept these big tech narratives. We can fight for something different. Merchant brings up the economic historian Aaron Benanav in discussing why the automation narrative is so persuasive. It relies on our sense that technological innovation is good and science improves our lives. But when these tools are used to suppress wages or make work more precarious, there's something going wrong here. He says, the automation theory suggests that inventors and scientists are hard at work innovating to make our lives better, which is true, but then translates problematically at the border between science and the economy. To me, this is the whole key. This translation, this interface between tech and society is where we feel the effects as exploitation. We want to believe technology is neutral, but increasingly we're being harmed by the values it serves. The thinker who helped me understand this interface is Harvard scholar Shoshana Zuboff. She's another critic who argues that technology doesn't have to be this way. Silicon Valley wants you to assume that this is just the way things are, but she makes a critical distinction, arguing that technology is not and never can be a thing in itself isolated from economics and society. Technology's DNA comes already patterned by what the sociologist Max Weber called the economic orientation. To me, this economic orientation is the same problematic translation that Benanav identified. It's the interface between science and economy that sets boundaries on what we can even imagine technology's purpose is. If the current system dictates that technology must always serve profit, then a UBI designed by that system will only further entrench its power. So yes, that's a real concern. A weak UBI designed by tech billionaires could do exactly that. To prevent this, we should be willing to fight for something more transformative, a strong UBI that meaningfully gives people the breathing room to participate in a reconceptualization of the values that infuse technological development. If automation really is on the cusp of creating all these great economic upheavals, this kind of crisis point could serve as the exact opportunity for people to demand a more radical vision for the future. Returning to the story I started the talk with, Zach stands out to me because he's emblematic of a generation that was told to learn to code, that did everything right, and is now facing an economy that's automating the very entry points they were promised. I'm thinking about all the energy that people like Zach spend tweaking thousands of resumes and cover letters, and I'm wondering, what would they be building if they weren't in this position? UBI doesn't promise a specific future, but it buys time. And time is what you need to imagine alternatives. And when more people get that time, we might start building futures we can't even picture yet.